Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
The cries for help echoed throughout the famous tourist area, immediately silencing the chatter and laughter of the tourists present. All eyes turned to a grimy, dirty-looking little girl, around 6 years old, lying on the ground amidst the shattered remains of the dishes she had accidentally knocked over. Luke, a 25-year-old young gardener, was the first to react. Without thinking, he set down the pruning shears he was holding and ran toward the fallen girl. The smell of food being sold in the tourist area mixed with the unmistakable odor of poverty emanating from the tattered clothes she wore. "Are you okay?" Luke asked, kneeling beside the girl, ignoring the disapproving looks of the nearby customers. The girl tried to respond, but only a faint breath came out. Her deep-set eyes in her dirt-smeared, pained face widened in a mix of shame and fear. She struggled to sit up, leaning on her trembling elbows, but her frail body wasn't cooperating. Luke realized something was wrong as her breathing became more labored and a seizure began. "She's having a seizure," Luke exclaimed, recognizing the symptoms from a first aid course he had taken last summer. Panic spread through the tourist area like a wave. The murmurs turned into worried cries and a few screams. A middle-aged woman in designer clothes stood up from her table. "Somebody call an ambulance," she shouted, pulling her mobile phone from her handbag. While chaos erupted around him, Luke remained calm. He leaned in close to the girl, speaking with a soft but firm voice. "Little one, I'm going to help you. Try to stay calm. I'm going to press on your philtrum and hold your jaw in place." Jasper frowned as he glanced around, noting the expressions of the customers, ranging from concern to curiosity. "This is unacceptable," he muttered through clenched teeth. "Paulo, get this girl into the office immediately. We can't have this happening in the middle of the tourist area." Paulo hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the order. "But sir, moving her could make things worse." "I said take her to the office," Jasper barked, his face reddening with anger. Luke, focused on helping the girl, finally looked up at his boss. "With all due respect, Mr. Jasper, we can't move her. She needs to stay still and keep breathing until the paramedics arrive." The tension in the air was palpable, and the customers watched the exchange in disbelief and disapproval of the manager's attitude. A couple swimming nearby even began packing up their things, mumbling about the lack of humanity. Realizing the negative reaction, Jasper grudgingly backed down. "Fine," he muttered through clenched teeth. "But as soon as the ambulance arrives, I want this situation dealt with immediately. And Luke, we'll be having a talk later." As this scene played out, the girl's breathing began to normalize, color returning to her cheeks, and the panic in her eyes gave way to deep exhaustion. "Thank you, sir," she whispered in a hoarse voice, weakly gripping Luke's hand. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Luke gave her a warm smile. "You don't need to thank me. What's your name?" "Lucy," she answered, a small smile appearing on her tired face. "Lucy. It's nice to meet you, Lucy," Luke said. "Do you feel strong enough to sit up?" Lucy nodded slowly. Carefully, Luke helped her lean against a nearby wall. That's when he noticed what he had missed during the crisis, a small plastic bag that Lucy had been carrying, filled with empty cans and bottles picked up from the streets. The realization hit Luke like a punch to the gut. This little girl wasn't just sick, she was homeless, likely entering the tourist area in search of scraps of food. The young man felt his heart tighten. He looked around, seeing the pitying and disgusted look some customers gave Lucy. How could they be so heartless? Didn't they see that this was a human being in need of help, not judgment? At that moment, the sound of an approaching ambulance siren cut through the air, growing louder by the second. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the tourist area. "They're coming to help you, Lucy," Luke said, gently patting her head. "You'll be taken care of soon." Lucy nodded but still looked worried. "Sir," she said softly. "I don't have any money to pay for the ambulance or the hospital. I only came in here because of the smell of food. Her voice trailed off as tears began to roll down her dirty cheeks. Luke felt a lump form in his throat. Without thinking further, he made a decision. "Don't worry about that, Lucy," he said firmly. "I'll take care of everything." Just then, 2 paramedics arrived, bringing their equipment with them. Luke gestured to them and quickly explained the situation as they began attending to Lucy. While the paramedics worked, Luke approached Paolo, who had been standing nearby, watching the scene unfold with a mix of concern and relief. "Paolo," Luke said quietly. "I need a favor. Could you get me the bill for that table over there?" Paolo looked confused. "That table? But no one ordered anything there tonight." "I know," Luke replied. "Just bring me a blank bill, please." Still bewildered, Paolo nodded and went to the cash register. Meanwhile, the paramedics had finished their initial assessment of Lucy. "Her condition has stabilized," one of them reported. "But we need to take her to the hospital for further evaluation and treatment." Lucy began to protest weakly, but Luke intervened. "For your own good, Lucy, please let them take care of you properly." With a resigned sigh, Lucy finally nodded as the paramedics helped her onto a stretcher. Paolo returned with the blank bill Luke had requested. Luke took a pen from his shirt pocket and, without hesitation, wrote an amount on the bill, the entire sum he had saved up to buy a second-hand motorcycle. But in that moment, nothing mattered more than helping the little girl fate had placed in his path. He walked over to the paramedics and handed them the bill along with his debit card. "This will cover the transportation costs and part of the treatment," he said. "Please make sure she gets the care she needs." The paramedics looked at him in surprise but nodded respectfully. "You're a good man," one of them said, swiping his card through a handheld machine. As they lifted Lucy onto the stretcher, she reached out with a trembling hand toward Luke. "God bless you, Mr. Luke," she whispered, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "I'll never forget what you did for me today." Luke took her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Take care, Lucy. I hope you recover soon." As the ambulance drove away and the evening turned to night, its flashing lights illuminated the now quiet tourist area. The guests began returning to their meals, whispering about what they had just witnessed. Luke stood at the entrance for a moment, processing everything that had happened. That's when he felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. He turned to face Jasper, whose face showed a mix of anger and something close to admiration. "Luke," Jasper said, his voice tense. "I need to see you in the office right now." The young gardener nodded, knowing that what was coming wouldn't be pleasant. As he followed Jasper toward the back of the tourist area, he could feel the eyes of his co-workers and the guests on him, some looking at him with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with something like respect. Jasper's office was a small but tastefully decorated space with a wooden desk and shelves filled with cookbooks and expensive bottles of wine. The manager sat behind his desk and gestured for Luke to sit opposite him. "Luke," Jasper began, folding his hands on the desk. "What you did tonight is very complicated." Luke sat up straight in the chair, ready to defend his actions. "Mr. Jasper, I know it wasn't the usual thing to do, but that little girl needed help. I couldn't just." Jasper raised a hand to cut him off. "Your quick actions may have saved that girl's life." "That's admirable," he paused, and his expression hardened. "But on the other hand, you put this resort's reputation at risk. This resort is known for its aesthetics and privacy. We can't have people from the streets coming in and causing scenes like this." Luke felt a wave of anger rising within him. "With all due respect, sir, are you saying that a person's life is worth less than the resort's reputation?" Jasper sighed, rubbing his forehead. "It's not that simple, Luke. This business relies on maintaining a certain image. If we start being known as a place where anyone can come in and cause disruptions, we'll lose customers. And if we lose customers, people will lose their jobs, including you." "But..." Luke began, but Jasper interrupted him again. Furthermore, the manager continued, his voice turning harder. You paid for that girl with the resort's money. That is technically theft. Luke's mouth fell open for a moment, unable to believe what he had just heard. The accusation of theft hit him like a slap in the face. Theft, he repeated, his voice trembling with outrage. Mr. Jasper, with all due respect, I didn't use the resort's money. I paid with my personal savings. Jasper looked surprised for a moment but quickly regained his composure. Your personal savings? Why would you do that for a complete stranger? Because it was the right thing to do, Luke replied without hesitation. That girl needed help, and I had the means to help her. Isn't that what we should do as human beings? A tense silence filled the office. Jasper stared at Luke as if seeing him for the first time. For a moment, it seemed like he wanted to say something more, but then he shook his head, and his expression hardened once again. No matter how noble your intentions were, Luke, the fact remains that you broke several resort policies tonight, Jasper said, his tone cold and professional. You allowed someone clearly not adhering to our dress code inside, you left your post without permission to tend to the girl, and most seriously, you caused a disturbance that upset our regular customers. Luke could feel his blood boiling in his veins. Are you serious? Are you saying I should have just let that poor girl die in the middle of your famous resort? Of course not. Jasper exclaimed, slamming his hand on the desk. But there are ways to handle these situations without causing a scene like this. You could have quietly called an ambulance and escorted her out through the back. Escorted her out through the back. Luke interrupted, disbelief coloring his voice. Like she was trash that needed to be hidden away. Luke cut in, unable to believe what he was hearing. Is that how you treat people in need of help? Jasper stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. Watch your tone, young man. I'm your boss, and you owe me respect. Luke stood up as well, facing Jasper. Respect is earned, Mr. Jasper. I'm sorry, but I can't respect someone who values reputation and appearances over human life. For a moment, it looked like Jasper was about to explode. But then, to Luke's surprise, the manager let out a bitter laugh and collapsed back into his chair. You're young and idealistic, Luke, Jasper said, his voice suddenly weary. You think the world is just black and white, that there's always a clear right and wrong choice. But reality is much more complicated. I have a responsibility not just to the customers but to all the employees of this resort. Every decision I make affects their lives and livelihoods. Luke felt his anger slowly ebb away, replaced by a mixture of frustration and sadness. I understand you have responsibilities, Mr. Jasper, but don't you think we also have a responsibility to the community, to those less fortunate than us? Jasper let out a deep sigh. Maybe you're right, Luke. Maybe I've lost sight of some of the important things in my efforts to keep this business afloat. But the fact remains that the rules are in place for a reason, and you broke them tonight. Luke felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. He knew what was coming. I'm sorry, Luke, Jasper said, his voice firm but tinged with regret. But I don't have a choice. You're fired. Those words landed like a punch, even though he had seen this coming. This job had been his lifeline, the way he supported his family and saved for his education, and now it was all gone in an instant. I understand, Luke said after a moment, his voice strangely calm. Can I finish working tomorrow? I owe it to my colleagues. Jasper seemed taken aback by Luke's composure. After a moment of consideration, he nodded. All right. Finish your shift tomorrow. After that, pack your things. I'll pay you through the end of the week as severance. Luke nodded silently and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned to look at Jasper one last time. Mr. Jasper, he said. I know you think you're doing the right thing for the business. But I hope one day you'll realize that some things are more important than money and reputation. Compassion and humanity are what truly define us as people. Without waiting for a response, Luke left the office, closing the door gently behind him. He paused for a moment to take a deep breath, trying to process everything that had happened over the past hour. He had saved a life but lost his job. Was it worth it? Without hesitation, Luke knew the answer was yes. Holding his head high, he made his way back to the dormitory. The night was long and difficult, but he was determined to maintain his dignity and professionalism until the end. As he walked, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held and whether he would ever see Lucy again. Little did Luke know that fate had more surprises in store for him that day, and his good deed would have consequences he couldn't have imagined. When Luke returned to the dormitory, the atmosphere had shifted significantly. His co-workers, who had witnessed the scene from afar, approached him with concerned expressions. "What happened, Luke?" Frank, one of the resort's longest-serving gardeners, asked. "Was it about the girl?" Luke gave a sad smile. "You could say that. Mr. Jasper fired me." A wave of outrage swept through the group of workers. Paolo, a close colleague, stepped forward with a scowl on his face. "This is unacceptable," he said quietly but firmly. "They can't fire you just for helping someone in need. We should do something, maybe strike." "No, Paolo," Luke interrupted, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. "I appreciate the support from everyone, but I don't want anyone else getting into trouble because of me. Besides, I've already made my decision. I'll finish my shift tomorrow, and then I'll leave." The other employees exchanged worried and respectful glances. Luke had always been admired by his colleagues for his work ethic and positive attitude. Seeing him in this situation stirred deep emotions within them. "At least let us buy you a few beers after the shift," Cedro, one of the workers, suggested. "To send you off properly." Luke smiled, touched by the gesture. As the group dispersed to get some sleep, Luke took a deep breath and prepared to face the rest of the night. He resolved that if tomorrow was to be his last day at the resort, he would make it memorable for the right reasons. The next day, Luke worked with renewed energy and enthusiasm. Every tree he trimmed, every flower bed he tended, became a small celebration of what true beauty meant. It wasn't just about trees and flowers, but about creating connections with people and making them feel relaxed and refreshed. The customers seemed to notice the difference, with many complimenting his work, commenting on how beautifully the plants had been shaped and remarking on his positive attitude. Some even mentioned having seen him help the little girl and expressed admiration for his actions. By the pool, a middle-aged man called out. "Excuse me, young man," the man said, his voice deep and friendly. "Are you the worker who helped that poor girl yesterday?" Luke nodded, feeling slightly embarrassed by the attention. "Yes, sir, I was just doing what anyone else would have done." The man smiled, his face showing genuine approval. "I'm not so sure about that. What you did was extraordinary. The world needs more people like you." "Thank you, sir," Luke replied, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I really appreciate your kind words." As he walked away from the table, Luke couldn't shake the bittersweet feeling. It was ironic to receive so much praise on the day he was losing his job. But at the same time, he felt an odd sense of peace. Deep down, he knew he had done the right thing, and that was worth more than any job. As night fell and the resort started to empty out, Luke was tidying up when he noticed Jasper leaving his office and walking toward him with a determined stride. He braced himself for another confrontation, but to his surprise, the manager's face didn't show anger. Instead, it was a complex expression of regret and resignation. "Luke," Jasper said quietly. "Can we talk for a minute?" Luke, curious, nodded and followed Jasper to a quiet corner of the resort. Thank you for watching the video all the way through. You are our biggest motivation to keep creating. Let us know where you're watching from so we can see how far this video has reached around the world. Don't forget to hit like if you found it interesting, and share it with your friends too. I've been thinking about what happened, Jasper began, avoiding Luke's gaze. And maybe I was too hard on you. Luke remained silent, waiting to see where the conversation would lead. What you did for that girl was admirable, Jasper continued. And you were right, there are things more important than money and reputation. Since the incident, I've received numerous calls from customers praising your actions and service. Some even threatened not to return if I fired you. Luke blinked in surprise, not expecting his actions to have such a significant impact. What I'm trying to say is, Jasper finally looked Luke in the eyes. If you're willing, I'd like you to reconsider your position here. The resort needs people like you, Luke, people with integrity and compassion. For a moment, Luke didn't know what to say. A part of him wanted to accept the offer immediately, return to the safety of his job, and forget about everything. But another part, the part that had grown stronger that day, knew that things couldn't simply go back to the way they were. I appreciate your offer, Mr. Jasper, Luke finally said. Truly, I do. But I think we both know that things have changed. I can't work in a place where I have to compromise my values or where people are treated differently based on their appearance or status. Jasper nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer. I understand and respect your decision, Luke. You're a young man with principles, and that will take you far in life. He extended his hand. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and thank you for reminding me of what truly matters. Luke shook Jasper's hand, sensing that something fundamental had shifted between them. They were no longer just boss and employee but two men who had learned a valuable lesson that night. Thank you, Mr. Jasper, Luke said. For the opportunity to work here and for this conversation. I hope the resort continues to thrive, but I also hope it finds a way to become more inclusive and compassionate in the future. With one last handshake, they parted ways. Luke returned to his work, determined to finish his final shift with the same dedication and passion as when he first started at the resort. As he trimmed the plants, Luke couldn't help but reflect on the events of the night. Yes, he had lost his job, but he had gained something far more valuable, the certainty that he could stand by his principles, even in the most challenging circumstances. He was surrounded by his colleagues for one final moment. There were hugs, words of encouragement, and promises to stay in touch. Luke felt overwhelmed by the support and affection of the people with whom he had shared many long, hard-working hours and countless laughs. Don't forget, you owe us a few beers, someone joked. Luke smiled, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and excitement about what was to come. I won't forget. See you all at our usual bar in half an hour, he replied. The morning after the events at the resort, the sky was gray and it was raining, as if the weather was reflecting Luke's mood. He woke up with a slight headache, a reminder of the beers he had shared with his former colleagues the night before. Despite the hangover and the uncertainty about his future, he didn't regret his actions. Luke got out of bed and headed to the small kitchen in his shared apartment. His roommate, Aaron, was already there, making coffee. Good morning, hero, Aaron greeted with a teasing smile. How does it feel to be both unemployed and famous at the same time? Luke groaned in response, gratefully accepting the cup of coffee Aaron handed him. Famous? What are you talking about? Aaron raised an eyebrow in surprise. You haven't checked social media yet, have you? Your story has gone viral. Someone at the resort recorded part of what happened and posted it online. Now everyone is talking about the heroic waiter who saved a little girl and got fired for it. Luke nearly choked on his coffee. You've got to be kidding me. Nope, Aaron replied, handing him his phone. See for yourself. With a mix of amazement and horror, Luke watched the video. Sure enough, someone had captured the moment he helped Lucy breathe, followed by a portion of his argument with Jasper. The comments were full of praise for him and criticism of the resort for its apparent lack of humanity. This is crazy, Luke whispered, handing the phone back to Aaron. I just wanted to help someone, not cause all this trouble. Welcome to the age of social media, my friend, Aaron said, patting him on the shoulder. By the way, you've got about 1,000 messages and friend requests. I think some local newspapers even want to interview you. Luke put his hand on his face, feeling like the day had spiraled out of control. I don't know if I'm ready for all this, Aaron. I just want to find a new job and move on with my life. I get that. But maybe you should consider using this attention, Aaron suggested. You could use this platform to speak out about important issues, like injustice or lack of empathy in society. Luke was about to respond when his phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. With a little hesitation, he answered. Hello? Luke, a female voice asked on the other end. Yes, this is he. Good morning, Luke. I'm a doctor from Central Hospital. I'm calling about the patient who was admitted last night, Lucy. You're listed as the person who covered her medical fees. Luke's heart skipped a beat. Yes, that's right. Is something wrong with her? Ms. Garcia is stable, the doctor assured him. In fact, she's been asking about you. She wanted to know if you could come visit her. She said she has something important to tell you. Luke was silent for a moment, surprised by the request. Of course, he finally replied. I'll be there as soon as I can. After hanging up, Luke quickly explained the situation to Aaron. Go on, his friend said. I'll sort through your messages and hold off the reporters for now. Grateful, Luke quickly changed and left the apartment. As he waited for the bus in the drizzle, he couldn't stop wondering what Lucy wanted to tell him and how these new developments would affect his already complicated situation. The ride to the hospital was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions for Luke. On one hand, he was relieved to hear that Lucy was doing well. On the other hand, the sudden media attention made him uneasy. He had never wanted to be in the spotlight, and the idea of becoming some kind of local celebrity made him uncomfortable. When he arrived at the Central Hospital, Luke had to stop by the reception desk to get Lucy's room number. The receptionist looked at him with a mix of recognition and admiration. You're the waiter from the video, aren't you? She asked while checking her computer. Luke nodded, feeling a bit awkward. Yes, I suppose I am. What you did was very brave, she said with a warm smile. The world needs more people like you. Thank you, Luke murmured, feeling his face heat up. I just did what I thought was right. With the room information in hand, Luke made his way to the elevator. As he rode up to the third floor, he couldn't help but think about how one simple act of kindness had set off a chain of events that was changing his life in ways he never imagined. When he reached room 206, Luke knocked gently before entering. The scene that greeted him took him by surprise. Lucy was sitting up in bed, looking much healthier than she had the day before. Her hair was neatly combed, and she was dressed in a clean hospital gown. Beside her, sitting in a chair, was an older man dressed in formal attire that looked like it cost more than a month's salary for Luke. Mr. Luke! Lucy exclaimed when she saw him, her face lighting up. Luke suddenly felt self-conscious. Good morning, Lucy. I'm so glad to see you looking better. The man beside her stood up and extended his hand to Luke. So you're the heroic young man I've heard so much about, he said in a deep, warm voice. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Aiden, Lucy's father. Luke shook the man's hand, noticing the firm grip and the expensive watch on his wrist. Nice to meet you. I'm Luke. I know, Aiden replied with a smile. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about you since she woke up, and I must say, I've heard quite a bit about your actions on the news as well. Luke felt uncomfortable. Honestly, it was nothing, sir. Anyone would have done the same. Oh, but you're wrong, Lucy chimed in. Not everyone would risk losing their job to help a ragged little stranger. What you did was extraordinary, and that's why my family wanted to meet you. Luke sat down in the empty chair, curious about where the conversation was headed. Why did they want to meet me? Aiden and Lucy exchanged knowing glances before the man continued. You see, Luke, Aiden began, his tone growing more serious. There's something you need to know about us. My daughter and I, we're not exactly who we appear to be. Luke frowned in confusion. I don't understand, sir. Lucy spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. What my father means is that I'm not actually a beggar, Mr. Luke. In fact, my family is quite wealthy. The young man felt as though the ground beneath him was shifting. But why? Why my daughter would dress like a homeless person and walk into a famous resort, Aiden finished the thought. It's a long story, but we owe you an explanation. Over the next half hour, Aiden and Lucy told Luke a story that seemed like it had been lifted straight out of a novel. It turned out Aiden was a successful businessman who had made a fortune in real estate. He and his wife had been married for over 30 years, but recently, they had felt disconnected from the reality of ordinary people. We realized we were living in a bubble, Aiden explained. Surrounded by luxury and people who only wanted to take advantage of our fortune. We wanted to remember where we came from and see how society treats the less fortunate. So, we decided to conduct a social experiment, Aiden continued. We had Lucy dress as a homeless person and attempt to enter high-end places. We wanted to see how people would react, if anyone would show compassion. Luke listened, stunned, trying to process all this information. But, Lucy, you actually had a seizure. That couldn't have been part of the plan. Lucy gave a sad smile. Yes, Mr. Luke. That part wasn't planned. I have chronic epilepsy, and the stress of the situation triggered a real seizure. That's when you became our guardian angel. Aiden placed a hand on Luke's shoulder. What you did, young man, went far beyond any expectations we had. You didn't just help my daughter in her moment of real need, but you sacrificed your job and savings for someone you believed to be a complete stranger. Luke was silent for a moment, trying to absorb everything he'd just heard. A part of him felt deceived, but another part understood the motivation behind Lucy's family's actions. I understand why you did this, he finally said. But why are you telling me this now? Aiden and Lucy exchanged glances before he answered. Because we want to repay you, Luke, Aiden said. Not just for helping my daughter, but for being an example of what humanity should be. We want to offer you a job. Luke blinked in surprise. A job? But you don't even know what skills I have. We know what's most important, Aiden interrupted. Kindness and compassion, Lucy added. We know you're someone with empathy, courage, and integrity. Those are qualities you can't teach, young man. Aiden nodded and continued explaining. You see, Luke, in addition to my real estate businesses, I also run a charitable foundation that works to help the homeless. After seeing what you've demonstrated, I want to offer you the role of project coordinator for the foundation. I believe your perspective and your heart will be invaluable to our work. Luke sat silently for a moment. The offer was incredible, almost too good to be true. But part of him couldn't help but feel slightly uncomfortable. This is a very generous offer, he said at last. But I'm not sure if I can accept it. I feel like I'd be taking advantage of the situation. I didn't do what I did hoping to be rewarded. Lucy reached out and took Luke's hand. I know that, Mr. Luke, and that's exactly why we want you to work with us. We're not offering you charity, we're offering you an opportunity to keep doing what is clearly your mission, helping others. Aiden added. And besides, Luke, think of all the good you could do from this position. You'd have the resources and support to help even more people. Luke thought for a moment, weighing the offer. It was true that he had always wanted to do more for his community but never had the means to do it on a larger scale. This could be the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Can I think about it? He finally asked. This is a big decision, and I don't want to rush into it. Of course, Aiden replied, pulling a business card from his pocket and handing it to Luke. Take your time. Here's my contact information. When you're ready, give me a call, and we can discuss the details. Luke took the card, feeling the weight of the decision in front of him. Just then, his phone vibrated in his pocket. When he pulled it out, he saw dozens of notifications from social media and many messages from unknown numbers. "It seems you've become a bit of a celebrity," Lucy said with a smile. Luke replied, feeling weary. "It seems that way. But I'm not sure how I'll handle all this attention." "Maybe you can use that attention for something good," Aiden suggested. "Your story has inspired so many people. You could use this platform to raise awareness about the issues homeless people face and how others can make a difference." Luke nodded slowly, considering the idea. "I guess you're right. It's just, all of this is overwhelming. 24 hours ago, I was just a gardener trying to make a living, and now. And now you're a symbol of kindness and compassion," Lucy added. "I know it's a big responsibility, but I believe you can rise to the challenge, Luke." At that moment, a nurse entered the room. "I'm sorry, but visiting hours are over. The little girl needs to rest." 15 minutes after Luke left Lucy's room, the hospital hallways suddenly erupted in chaos. Nurses and security staff rushed back and forth, and the sound of heated arguing filled the air. Luke, who had been sitting in the hospital cafe, thinking about Aiden's job offer, poked his head into the hallway to see what was happening. To his surprise, he saw a well-dressed man arguing with security. It took him a moment to realize it was Jasper, his former boss from the resort. "I demand to see Aiden immediately," Jasper yelled, his face flushed with anger and frustration. "I know he's here." Cautiously, Luke stepped closer, unsure if he should intervene. Just then, Jasper spotted him. "You!" Jasper shouted, pointing at Luke. "You're part of this, aren't you? This is a conspiracy to ruin my resort." Before Luke could respond, Aiden appeared in the hallway. His authoritative presence instantly quieted the commotion. "Mr. Jasper," Aiden said calmly but firmly. "I understand you're upset, but this is neither the time nor the place to make a scene. If you have something you need to discuss with me, we can do so privately and civilly." Jasper deflated slightly in the face of Aiden's presence but maintained his challenging attitude. "Fine," he growled. "We'll talk privately, but I want answers." Aiden nodded and led Jasper into an empty waiting room. Before entering, he turned to Luke. "Luke, could you join us? I think your presence might be helpful in this conversation." Surprised, Luke nodded and followed them into the room. Once inside, Aiden closed the door and turned to Jasper. "Now, Mr. Jasper, what exactly do you want to know?" Jasper took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. "I want to know what's going on. First, a girl looking like a homeless beggar walks into my resort and causes a scene. Then I find out she's the daughter of one of the richest men in the city. And now, my resort is being attacked on social media and in the press for discrimination. What game are you all playing?" Aiden listened patiently, his expression neutral as Jasper finished. The businessman sat down in one of the chairs and gestured for Jasper to do the same. "Mr. Jasper," Aiden began. "I understand your frustration, but I assure you, there is no game or conspiracy. What happened is the result of a social experiment my family and I decided to conduct, and the unforeseen consequences that followed." Over the next few minutes, Aiden explained the experiment to Jasper, just as he had done with Luke earlier. He spoke of their desire to understand how society treats those less fortunate and how the incident at the resort was an unplanned, unexpected turn of events. Jasper listened in silence, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief and finally to a mix of shame and understanding. At last, Jasper spoke, his voice calmer. "So, it wasn't a deliberate attempt to discredit my resort?" "Not at all," Aiden replied. "In fact, your resort was chosen at random. It could have been any high-end resort in the city." Jasper sat down in a chair, putting his hand to his face. "Oh my God, what have I done?" he muttered. Luke, who had been quietly observing the exchange, finally spoke up. "Mr. Jasper, no one expected things to unfold this way. We all made mistakes that day." Jasper looked at Luke, a range of emotions crossing his face. "Luke, I owe you an apology. I reacted poorly that day. I was too focused on the resort's image and forgot about what really matters, the kindness and good service you always provided." Aiden watched the exchange with interest. "Mr. Jasper, it seems like you had an excellent employee in Luke. Or perhaps I should say, you once had." Jasper nodded sadly. "Yes, and it's my fault for letting him go. Luke, if you want to return to the resort, your position is always available. In fact, I'd like to offer you a promotion to supervisor. We need more people like you to set the right example." Luke was stunned by the offer. But before he could respond, Aiden intervened. "Actually, Mr. Jasper, I've also offered Luke a job at my charitable foundation. But perhaps there's a way we can all win in this situation." Both Jasper and Luke looked at Aiden with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Jasper asked. Aiden smiled. "I'm thinking about a collaboration. The resort could partner with my charitable foundation to create a training and employment program for homeless people or those in difficult situations. They could learn gardening and cooking skills in a high-end resort environment, and those who show promise could even be hired permanently." Jasper seemed to consider the idea, a flicker of interest lighting up in his eyes. "This is an intriguing proposal. It would certainly help improve the resort's image after this incident, and it could genuinely make a difference in people's lives," he added, his voice now filled with enthusiasm. Aiden nodded. "Exactly. And Luke, you could be the perfect bridge between the resort and the foundation. You could work part-time in both places, overseeing the training program and ensuring it's implemented properly." Luke's heart raced at the prospect. This was a chance to combine his experience at the resort with his desire to help others. "What do you think, gentlemen?" Aiden asked, looking at both Jasper and Luke. "Are you ready to turn this difficult situation into an opportunity to do good?" Jasper sat up straighter, his eyes bright with newfound determination. "I accept your proposal. It's time for this resort to become a model, not only for excellence in hospitality but also for social responsibility." Both men turned to Luke, awaiting his response. Luke felt the weight of the decision on his shoulders but also the excitement building inside him as new possibilities unfolded before him. "I accept too," Luke finally said, a smile spreading across his face. "I believe we can do something really special together." Aiden smiled with satisfaction. "Wonderful. Well, gentlemen, it looks like we have work to do." The three men stood up and shook hands, sealing their new partnership. Just as they were about to leave the room, the door opened, and Lucy, accompanied by a nurse, stepped in. "Did I miss anything?" Lucy asked with a playful grin. Aiden walked over to his daughter, taking her hand. "My dear, I think our little family experiment has led to results far greater than we ever imagined." As Aiden recapped the agreement for Lucy, Luke couldn't help but reflect on how a simple act of kindness had triggered a chain of events with the potential to change the lives of so many people. He realized that sometimes the smallest actions can lead to the greatest and most meaningful outcomes. In the days and weeks that followed, the story of Luke, Lucy, and the incident at the resort became national news. But instead of a scandal about discrimination, it turned into an inspiring tale of redemption, second chances, and the power of compassion. The training program at the resort was successfully launched, and Luke split his time between the resort and Aiden's foundation, becoming the heart of an initiative that was transforming lives. As for Jasper, he underwent a personal transformation. The man who once cared only about image and status became a passionate advocate for corporate social responsibility. The resort became a model in the industry, proving that excellence in hospitality and social awareness were not mutually exclusive. Aiden's family continued their charitable work, but now with a renewed focus and a deeper understanding of the challenges faced by the vulnerable. Their experience had strengthened their commitment to making a real difference in their community. As for Luke, he discovered that he had found his true calling. He was no longer just a gardener but also a mentor, a supporter, and a bridge between two worlds that rarely intersected. Every day, when he saw the smiles on the faces of those he helped, he was reminded that sometimes all it takes to change the world is a simple act of kindness and the courage to stand up for what's right.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.